The grand and often tragic story of the Habsburgs echoes through their palaces, their art, and even their quietest retreats. For centuries, the most powerful family in Europe sought solace and sport in hunting lodges scattered across their vast empire. But within these rustic walls, away from the prying eyes of Vienna's court, not all was peace and idyllic pursuit. Some of these lodges hold secrets, whispers of events that shook the empire, tragedies that tore at the heart of the imperial family, or mysteries that remain unsolved to this day. These are not merely buildings, they are silent witnesses to ambition, despair, love, and death. Places where the veneer of imperial grandeur sometimes cracked to reveal the raw human struggles beneath. Number 1. Hunting Lodge Blühnbach. High in the crisp-clear air of the Austrian Alps, nestled deep within a valley, lies the ancient hunting lodge, Blühnbach. This wasn't just a simple rural escape. It was a vast estate, a place of profound solitude and personal refuge for a man who carried the weight of an empire's future on his shoulders, whether he wanted it or not. Archduke Franz, Ferdinand the heir apparent to the Austro-Hungarian throne, bought Blühnbach in 1908. He loved the wildness of it, the towering mountains, the dense forests teeming with game. Here he could indulge his passion for hunting, a pursuit that bordered on obsession. His personal records detailed an astonishing number of kills. Over 300,000 animals throughout his lifetime. At Blühnbach, he added, countless deer, chamois, and ibex to that tally. The lodge became a monument to his singular tastes, filled with a bizarre collection of hunting trophies, ancient armor, and strange artifacts from across the globe. He even had a dedicated hunting museum built there to display his gruesome spoils. But Blühnbach was more than a hunting ground for Franz Ferdinand. It was a sanctuary, a place where he could escape the stifling protocol of the Viennese court and live a semblance of a normal life with his beloved wife, Sophie Chotek. Their marriage was a scandal, a morganatic union, meaning Sophie, despite being a countess, could never share his imperial rank, or produce heirs to the throne. The court, especially Emperor Franz Joseph, never truly accepted her. This rejection gnawed at Franz Ferdinand, fueling a simmering resentment against the very system he was destined to inherit. At Blühnbach, they were free. They raised their children, Sophie, Max, and Ernst. Far from the critical stares and whispers of the aristocracy, the lodge became a symbol of his defiance, a haven built for a love that Vienna deemed unworthy. The dark secret of Blühnbach isn't a single event, but a slow, brooding accumulation of resentments and stubbornness that defined Franz Ferdinand. He was a difficult man, known for his quick temper, his rigid opinions, and his deep-seated prejudices. While at Blühnbach, surrounded by the silence of the mountains and the grandeur of his trophies, he meticulously planned his future reign. He envisioned radical reforms, a reorganization of the empire, and a dramatic shift in its foreign policy. He believed Austria-Hungary needed to avoid war with Russia, but was convinced a conflict with Serbia was inevitable and necessary. His plans, hatched in the solitude of Blühnbach, were often at odds with the current imperial government, and even his aging uncle, the emperor. He was a reformer, but a harsh, autocratic one, and his vision was often seen as dangerous by those around him. He was superstitious, too. He consulted mediums and believed in omens. His hunting trophies, countless glassy eyes staring out from the walls of Blühnbach, could be seen as a silent, eerie collection of the lives he had taken. Some whispered that the sheer volume of his kills was an unnatural act, a disturbance of the natural order that would surely bring a heavy price. The fairy air around Blühnbach seemed to hold the weight of his unyielding will and his frustrations. He spent countless hours there, walking the grounds, riding through the forests, planning, brooding, and collecting. In the spring of 1914, just a few months before his fateful journey to Sarajevo, Franz Ferdinand returned to Blühnbach. He had been suffering from poor health, and the mountain air was meant to revive him. He found solace in the quiet routine, the hunt, and the company of his family. He often took long walks, sometimes alone, sometimes with Sophie, discussing his plans, his worries, and his hopes for the future. He spoke of the increasing tensions in the Balkans, the complexities of Serbian nationalism, and the delicate balance of power in Europe. He was aware of the dangers, even dismissing concerns about his security in Sarajevo as overblown. The last time Franz Ferdinand left Blühnbach, it was not with a premonition of his impending doom, but with a sense of purpose. He was going to inspect military maneuvers in Bosnia, and Sophie, against the advice of many, insisted on accompanying him. It was a rare public appearance for her. As his wife, a moment of recognition she craved, and a gesture of love from him. He did not know that his meticulously planned life, the reforms he dreamed of, and the future he envisioned for his beloved Sophie and their children, would all vanish in a flash of gunfire on a hot June day. The dark secret of Blühnbach is the chilling irony that the very place where he sought refuge, where he forged his controversial plans, and stubbornly clung to his personal convictions, also served as the quiet, unwitting antechamber to the world-changing catastrophe that would soon engulf Europe and bring about the end of the Habsburg dynasty. The lodge, filled with the echoes of his pursuits and his unyielding spirit, stands as a silent sentinel to the man whose life and death irrevocably altered the course of history. The mountains watched him depart, and they waited for his return, a return that would never come. Number 2. Schloss Hermesvilla Lanesgame Reserve. Nestled deep within the vast Lanesgame Reserve on the western outskirts of Vienna, the Hermesvilla stands as a romantic, almost whimsical testament to a different kind of imperial burden. It was not built for grand state affairs or formal court life, but as a retreat, a haven from the gilded cage of Schönbrunn Palace. Emperor Franz Joseph commissioned the Hermesvilla in the 1880s. For his wife, Empress Elisabeth, often called Sisi, he hoped this beautiful secluded lodge would entice her to spend more time in Vienna, a city she increasingly despised. The irony, of course, is that the very place meant to ground her only highlighted her restless, elusive nature and her profound inner turmoil. Elisabeth was a woman consumed by a desperate desire for freedom, a longing to escape the relentless scrutiny of her public role. She was an athlete, a poet, and a beauty obsessed with maintaining her legendary figure, often to the point of extreme dieting and exercise. She rode horses with a fierce abandon, hiked mountains with the agility of a chamois, and spent hours in painstaking hair care rituals. But beneath this pursuit of physical perfection lay a deep melancholy, a profound dissatisfaction with her life. The Hermesvilla was meant to be her personal paradise, a place where she could breathe, think, and exist without the suffocating demands of court etiquette. The dark secret of the Hermesvilla is not a violent crime or a political conspiracy, but a pervasive, lingering sadness, a testament to the internal struggles of a woman trapped by her crown. Elisabeth rarely stayed there for long periods. Even her custom-built gymnasium, her private riding arena, and the carefully kibbuted gardens designed to evoke Greek mythology could not hold her for long. She was forever traveling, forever seeking new horizons, new forms of escape. She roamed Europe, sailing the seas, hiking in remote mountains, always accompanied by a retinue of ladies-in-waiting and personal staff, yet often feeling utterly alone. Her rooms in the Hermesvilla reflect her personality. They were decorated with delicate frescoes, depicting scenes from Shakespeare's A Midsummer Night's Dream, a nod to her love of poetry and fantasy. The famous bedroom of the Empress featured an enormous Baroque state bed from Empress Maria Theresa's time, but Elisabeth herself preferred a simple iron bed, a stark contrast to the opulence surrounding her. She even had a private staircase leading directly from her dressing room to the garden, allowing her to slip away unnoticed for her early morning rides or walks, a symbol of her desire for clandestine movement, her need to escape even the watchful eyes of her own servants. The Lanesgame Reserve, where Hermesvilla is located, was itself a vast hunting ground, though Elisabeth rarely participated in the hunt. She preferred to ride through the forests, her extraordinary beauty often noted by those who glimpsed her, her face hidden behind a fan or veil. It was a place where wild boars roamed and deer grazed freely, a wildness that perhaps mirrored the untamed spirit within the Empress herself. Yet, even in this vast natural setting, Elisabeth found no lasting peace. She was plagued by anxieties, by a deep-seated fear of aging, and a relentless introspection that bordered on obsession. She wrote melancholic poetry, expressing her feelings of alienation and her yearning for death as a release. The villa was a gift, an attempt by Franz Joseph to show his love and concern, to anchor his restless wife. But it was ultimately futile. Elisabeth's travels became more frequent, her absences longer. She sought solace in the company of poets and philosophers, in the spiritualism that was gaining popularity, and in her own peculiar, often solitary rituals. Her relationship with her husband, though affectionate, was distant, a partnership of duty rather than intimate connection. The death of her only son, Crown Prince Rudolf, at Merling in 1889, shattered her completely, plunging her into an even deeper, unshakable grief. After Rudolf's death, she wore black for the rest of her life, a perpetual symbol of her mourning and her profound detachment from the world. The Hermesvilla, meant to be a sanctuary, became a monument to a love that could not bind, a soul that could not be contained, and a life that, despite its immense privilege, was riddled with private sorrows. It speaks of the loneliness that can exist even within the most intimate imperial relationships, the unfulfilled longing for freedom, and the persistent specter of personal tragedy. It was a place where an empress tried and failed to find solace from the burdens of her crown and her own troubled mind. On a warm September day in 1898, far from the gardens of Hermesvilla, Elisabeth was walking along the shore of Lake Geneva in Switzerland. An Italian anarchist, Luigi Lucchini, lunged at her and stabbed her with a stiletto. She initially did not realize the severity of the wound, but collapsed shortly thereafter. Her death, sudden and violent, was the ultimate tragic escape she had perhaps unconsciously sought for years, leaving the Hermesvilla a beautiful silent echo of her lifelong quest for an unattainable peace. Number 3. Kaiser Villa, Bad Ischl. The Kaiser Villa in Bad Ischl was the Emperor Franz Joseph's cherished summer residence, a place he famously declared, "That is only when I am in Ischl that I feel truly at peace." Surrounded by the majestic mountains of the Salzkammergut region, with its manicured gardens and charming architecture, it seemed the epitome of imperial serenity. For decades, it was the backdrop for family gatherings, quiet holidays, and the emperor's tireless work. Even amidst the relaxation, Franz Joseph spent a significant part of every year here from spring until late autumn. It was a place of routine, stability, and deep personal attachment for him, a stark contrast to the formality of Vienna. The dark secret of the Kaiser Villa, however, isn't found in a dramatic, isolated incident, but in a crushing weight of history that descended upon its tranquil grounds. It was here in the emperor's study, a room filled with hunting trophies and mementos of a long life, that the decision was made that would plunge Europe into the darkest conflict it had ever known: the First World War. On July 28, 1914, following the assassination of his nephew, Archduke Franz, Ferdinand, and Sophie, in Sarajevo, the aging Emperor Franz Joseph signed the declaration of war against Serbia. This single act, undertaken in the quiet solitude of his beloved villa, ignited a chain reaction that would consume millions of lives, shatter empires, and forever alter the global landscape. The air on that fateful day in Bad Ischl was not thick with foreboding shouts or passionate arguments. Instead, there was a solemn, almost resigned quietness. The emperor, a man defined by duty and tradition, felt he had no other choice. The honor of his dynasty, the stability of his empire seemed to demand retaliation. He had been through so much personal loss the execution of his brother Maximilian, the suicide of his son Rudolf, the assassination of his wife Elisabeth. Now the murder of his heir was the final, unbearable blow. He signed the document, a simple sheet of paper that carried the weight of impending global catastrophe, in a room that had witnessed countless summer idylls and intimate family moments. The villa itself bears witness to the emperor's personal grief and solitude. His study, where the declaration was signed, remained largely untouched after his death. His simple iron bed, famously small and Spartan, speaks of a man who, despite his immense power, lived a life of strict discipline and personal austerity. The countless hunting trophies adorning the walls throughout the villa serve as a chilling reminder of the emperor's own passion for the hunt, a pursuit of dominance over nature that ironically foreshadowed the destructive forces he would unleash upon the human world. He was an avid hunter, like many Habsburgs, finding solace and purpose in the methodical pursuit of game. The mounted heads of deer and chamois watched silently as he made the decision that would unravel his world. Before this calamitous decision, the Kaiservilla had seen other, quieter sorrows. It was here that Franz Joseph received the devastating news of Crown Prince Rudolf's death at Mayerling. It was here that he grieved for his beloved Sisi. The villa, despite its beauty, became a repository of imperial pain, a place where private tragedies intersected with public duty. The signing of the war declaration was the culmination of these intertwined burdens, a final, desperate act by an old man grappling with an unpredictable world. The days leading up to the declaration were filled with frantic diplomatic exchanges, telegraphs arriving constantly from Vienna and across Europe. Franz Joseph, isolated in Bad Ischl, relied on his ministers for advice, but the ultimate decision rested solely with him. He was tired, burdened by decades of rule, and perhaps weary of a world that seemed to be slipping beyond his control. The tranquil gardens, usually filled with the laughter of his grandchildren or the gentle rustling of leaves, now seemed to hold a heavy silence, anticipating the storm that was about to break. The legacy of the Kaiservilla is thus complex. It is a symbol of imperial peace, a beloved summer home, but also a stark reminder of the moment. A global conflict was set in motion. The simple stroke of a pen in a quiet study, surrounded by the remnants of his personal passions, irrevocably changed millions of lives and sealed the fate of an empire that had stood for centuries. The villa, seemingly untouched by the cataclysm it helped unleash, silently guards the memory of that somber day, a constant reminder that even in the most serene of settings, the weight of power can lead to the most devastating of consequences. It stands as a monument not just to an emperor's life, but to a turning point in human history, forever stained by the quiet signing of a war declaration. Number 4. Eckartshöhe Castle. Eckartshöhe Castle, located in the lower Austrian lowlands, might not immediately spring to mind as a grand imperial residence. It was in many ways a modest hunting lodge compared to the sprawling palaces of Schönbrunn or Hofburg. Yet its relatively humble nature belies the profound historical weight it carries. For Eckartshöhe became the silent witness to the final, sorrowful chapter of the Habsburg monarchy's 640-year reign. It was here, in the autumn and winter of 1918, that Emperor Karl I, the last reigning Habsburg monarch, sought refuge after the collapse of his vast empire and the end of the First World War. The dark secret of Eckartshöhe is the quiet, almost pathetic surrender of an ancient power, the slow, agonizing death of an empire, and the final moments of a family's rule that had shaped European history for centuries. Karl I, who had ascended to the throne in 1916 amidst the chaos of war, was a deeply religious and well-meaning man, but he was overwhelmed by the monumental task of leading a multi-ethnic empire, tearing itself apart from within and without. As the war ended in defeat, and the constituent nations of the empire declared their independence, Vienna became a hotbed of republican fervor. The emperor, his wife, Empress Zita, and their 8 children were forced to flee, Schönbrunn Palace finding temporary shelter in Eckartshöhe. The castle, once a cheerful hunting lodge for earlier emperors, now served as a gilded prison. Karl hoped that by retreating from the capital he could buy time, perhaps negotiate a new future for the monarchy, or at least preserve the dignity of his family. But the tide of history was too strong. The provisional government of the new Republic of German Austria demanded his abdication. Karl, clinging to his dynastic rights and his belief in divine rule, refused to formally renounce his throne. He could not, in good conscience, betray his sacred oath. Instead, on November 11, 1918, in the quiet, somber drawing room of Eckartshöhe, Emperor Karl I signed a document that was a compromise, a desperate attempt to salvage some semblance of his dignity and the future of his family. It was not an abdication, but a declaration stating that he renounced participation in state affairs. He released his government from their oath of loyalty. This carefully worded document, signed with a heavy heart, effectively marked the end of the Habsburg Empire. Empress Sita, fiercely loyal and defiant, famously remarked that a monarch can never abdicate. He can only be dethroned. This silent act at Eckartshöhe was for all intents and purposes exactly that. The days at Eckartshöhe were filled with a profound sense of isolation and despair. The emperor and empress, accustomed to the deference of a sprawling court, were now largely alone, cut off from their former power and influence. They walked the quiet grounds, once alive with the sounds of the hunt, now echoing with the silence of a lost world. Their children, too young to fully grasp the enormity of their situation, played in the castle's park, unaware that their lives, like their parents', had been irrevocably altered. The castle's walls, which had seen many joyful hunts and imperial gatherings, now bore witness to the dismantling of an entire way of life. The supplies at Eckartshöhe dwindled. The new Republican government controlled their access to funds and resources. It was a calculated degradation, a slow, methodical chipping away at the imperial family's remaining power and pride. Members of the former imperial guard, still loyal, stood guard, a poignant symbol of a bygone era. The once grand meals of the imperial court were replaced by simpler fare. The future was uncertain, bleak. Finally, in March 1919, under immense pressure and with the threat of arrest looming, Karl I and his family were forced to leave Austria. British officials arranged for their exile. The departure from Eckartshöhe was somber, silent, filled with unspoken goodbyes to a land they would never rule again. They were taken by train like ordinary passengers across the border. It was an ignominious end for a dynasty that had shaped the very fabric of Europe. Eckartshöhe Castle stands as a poignant memorial to that quiet, devastating end. It holds the echoes of a broken oath, a desperate hope, and the profound sadness of a family forced to abandon centuries of tradition and power. It is a place where the grandeur of empire gave way to the stark reality of modern politics, where a sacred duty became an impossible burden, and where the final chapter of a magnificent, tumultuous story was written. Not with a bang, but with a sorrowful, almost imperceptible whisper. The hunting lodge, once a place of sport, became the stage for an empire's last breath. Number 5. Schloss Orth, Gumden. Schloss Orth, a picturesque water castle on an island in Lake Tronsey, NG, offers a seemingly idyllic setting, with its charming towers and turrets rising from the tranquil waters. It looks like something out of a fairy tale. For centuries it has been associated with the nobility eventually passing into Habsburg hands. But beneath its serene surface, Schloss Orth holds the unsettling echoes of one of the most enigmatic figures, a man who actively sought to shed his imperial identity and disappeared into the vast unknown, Archduke Johann Salvator of Austria. The dark secret of Schlosses Orth is not a murder or a political intrigue that unfolded within its walls, but the profound yearning for freedom and anonymity that drove a Habsburg prince to renounce his title and vanish without a trace leaving behind a legacy of mystery. Johann Salvator, a cousin of Emperor Franz Joseph, was an intelligent, artistic, and deeply unconventional man, known for his liberal views and his outspoken criticism of the rigid imperial court. He was an officer in the army, but also a composer, a sailor, and an intellectual who chafed under the stifling rules of his aristocratic life. Schloss Orth became entwined with his story in a tragic way. In the early 1880s, after a fire severely damaged the castle, Johann Salvator acquired it and oversaw its extensive reconstruction. He envisioned it as a place of retreat, a personal haven where he could pursue his passions away from the stifling glare of the court. He invested heavily in its restoration, creating a beautiful residence tailored to his unique tastes. It was here that he spent considerable time, perhaps dreaming of a life beyond the confines of his imperial lineage. His rebellion against the Habsburg establishment grew steadily. He published a scathing pamphlet criticizing the military. A direct affront to the emperor, he refused to conform, to play the part expected of him. His liberal sympathies and unconventional lifestyle made him a pariah in Vienna. The court, especially Emperor Franz Joseph, viewed him with growing disapproval, sensing a fundamental challenge to the very order they upheld. Johann Salvator was becoming a symbol of dissent, an imperial black sheep. The final dramatic act of his defiance came in 1889. The same year, Crown Prince Rudolf died at Merling. Johann Salvator, profoundly affected by Rudolf's death, and perhaps seeing a path to his own liberation, formally renounced his Habsburg titles and privileges. He was no longer Archduke Johann Salvator of Austria. He changed his name to Johann Orth, adopting the name of his beloved castle, a symbolic severance from his imperial past. He legally became a commoner, an unprecedented act for a Habsburg prince. He openly declared his intention to marry a commoner, Ludmilla Stubel, a dancer, further cementing his break with aristocratic tradition. The dark secret deepens here, as Johann Orth, with Ludmilla by his side, embarked on a journey that would lead to his ultimate disappearance. He bought a merchant ship, renamed it Santa Margarita, and set sail from Hamburg in 1890, ostensibly for South America. His plan was to escape the old world, to live a life of freedom and adventure, unburdened by his former identity. He visited Valparaiso, Chile, and was later seen in Buenos Aires. However, after departing from Rio de Janeiro in July 1890, bound for Valparaiso around Cape Horn, the Santa Margarita and all its passengers, including Johann Orth and Ludmilla, vanished without a trace. No distress signals were received. No wreckage was ever definitively identified. The vast, treacherous waters of Cape Horn, known for their violent storms, simply swallowed them whole. The Habsburg court, initially hoping for his return or a change of heart, was eventually forced to declare him officially dead in 1911. Though rumors and theories persisted for decades, some claimed he survived and lived under a new identity in South America. Others spoke of foul play. The mystery surrounding his fate remains unsolved to this day. Schloss, the castle that gave him his chosen name, thus stands as a permanent memorial to his audacious act of self-reinvention and his tragic disappearance. It represents a poignant blend of aspiration. Its charming silhouette against the lake's calm waters belies the radical break that transpired in the life of its former owner, a man who traded an imperial destiny for the boundless, terrifying freedom of the open sea. The castle, meticulously restored by his own hand, remains, while its namesake vanished into the depths, leaving behind only questions and the chilling silence of an unsolved mystery. The beautiful castle by the lake silently guards the memory of a prince who desperately wanted to be free and paid the ultimate price for his daring choice. Number 6. Schloss Persenburg. Schloss Persenburg, perched majestically above the Danube River, in Lower Austria is not a hunting lodge in the rustic sense of some other Habsburg properties. It is a grand castle, an ancestral seat of the Habsburg-Lorraine line, and has been in the family's possession for centuries. Its imposing architecture and historical significance are undeniable. Yet it carries a subtle, profound, dark secret, one that whispers of predestined burdens and the heavy weight of a declining emperor's. For it was within these ancient walls that Karl I, the last reigning emperor of Austria and king of Hungary, was born on August 17, 1887. The dark secret of Persenbeug is the chilling foresight of a fate that would unfold for its most famous occupant, a life defined by an impossible task, inheriting a dissolving empire and striving in vain to hold it together. Karl's birth at Persenbeug, a place steeped in generations of Habsburg history, symbolized the unbroken lineage of a dynasty that had once ruled much of Europe. Yet it was also the birthplace of a man who would preside over its ultimate catastrophic downfall. This is not a secret of scandal or violence, but of historical irony and a quiet, profound tragedy. The castle itself is a testament to the family's enduring presence and their deep roots in the Austrian landscape. It served as a private residence for various members of the imperial family, a place for quiet retreats, family gatherings, and, yes, hunting in the surrounding forests. The Emperor Franz Joseph's mother, Archduchess Sophie, often stayed there, and it was a favored haunt for other archdukes and archduchesses. It exuded an air of tradition, a sense of timeless permanence. But the very year of Karl's birth, 1887, was a turbulent one for the empire and for the Habsburg family itself. Tensions were rising across Europe. Nationalism was surging, and within the family strains were becoming apparent. Just 2 years later, the Meerling tragedy would shock the empire, setting in motion a chain of succession that would unexpectedly place Karl in direct line to the throne. He was not born to rule directly. He was a junior prince far down the line of succession. His destiny as emperor only emerged through a series of deaths and misfortunes that could not have been foreseen at his birth in Persenbeug. The dark secret also lies in the almost prophetic sense of doom that some might associate with Karl's reign. He was a devout Catholic, genuinely committed to his people, and tireless in his efforts to achieve peace during the First World War. He attempted radical reforms, from universal suffrage to creating a federal system to placate the empire's diverse nationalities. Yet from the moment he reluctantly ascended the throne in 1916, it was a losing battle. The forces arrayed against him, both internal and external, were simply too strong. The empire was dying, and he was the last to hold its fading light. Persenbeug, therefore, represents the beginning of an impossible journey. The grand halls and opulent rooms that witnessed Karl's earliest days also contained the silent echoes of the burden he was born into, a burden that would grow exponentially with each passing year. The castle, so solid and enduring, contrasts sharply with the fragile, crumbling empire Karl inherited. It is a subtle and poignant secret. The birthplace of the last emperor, a man destined to witness the end of everything his family had built over centuries. Visitors to Persenbeug today can walk through rooms where Karl spent his childhood, gaze upon the Danube, where he may have played, and stand in the very place where the last flicker of imperial hope was ignited. The castle, still privately owned by the Habsburg family, remains a powerful, tangible link to a bygone era. It silently whispers of fate, of the weight of history, and of a gentle, earnest man who, born into an ancient legacy at this beautiful historic castle, was tragically tasked with laying it to rest. The dark secret of Persenbeug is the quiet, almost unheard prophecy of an empire's final days, encapsulated in the life of the child born within its proud walls. Number 7. Meerling Hunting Lodge. Deep in the Vienna woods, cloaked in a perpetual atmosphere of sorrow and mystery, lies the former Meerling Hunting Lodge. It was here on the chilly morning of January 30th, 1889, that the Habsburg dynasty was forever scarred by an event so shocking, so shrouded in secrecy, that it continues to captivate and disturb more than a century later. This is the epicenter of the darkest, most enduring secret connected to any Habsburg hunting lodge. Crown Prince Rudolf, the only son of Emperor Franz Joseph and Empress Elisabeth, was found dead alongside his 17-year-old mistress, Baroness Mary Wetzera. The initial imperial announcement was vague, speaking of heart failure for Rudolf. Later, the official story became a murder-suicide. Rudolf shot Mary, and then himself. But the immediate aftermath was a whirlwind of frantic activity, cover-ups, and contradictory information that only deepened the mystery and cemented Meerling's place in history as a house of profound secrets. Rudolf was a complex, troubled man. Brilliant and liberal-minded, he clashed constantly with his conservative father, the emperor. He suffered from ill health, possibly syphilis, and was increasingly prone to melancholy, perhaps even depression. His marriage to Princess Stephanie of Belgium was unhappy, and he sought solace in extramarital affairs, most notably with the young, infatuated Mary Wetzera. She was obsessed with him, and their relationship became a desperate, entangled pact. The dark secret of Meerling is multifold: the true nature of the deaths, the swift and brutal cleanup operation, and the imperial family's desperate efforts to control the narrative. On the night of January 29th, Rudolf arrived at Meerling. With Mary, his valet, and coachman were the only other people present. The next morning, Rudolf failed to appear for breakfast. After a tense wait, his valet, Loschik, and his personal doctor, Dr. Hoffmann, forced their way into his locked bedroom. The scene they discovered was horrific. Mary Wetzera was found on the bed, dead. Rudolf was slumped by the bed, a pistol in his hand, a bullet wound to his head. The immediate reaction of the imperial court was panic and desperate damage control. To prevent a massive scandal, especially a suicide, which was a grave sin against the Catholic Church and forbidden for a crown prince, the initial story of heart failure was circulated. Rudolf's body was quickly dressed and removed. Mary Wetzera's body was smuggled out of Meerling under the cover of darkness, propped up in a carriage between two relatives, her rigor mortis making it seem as though she was alive. She was secretly buried in a nearby cemetery. The hunting lodge itself underwent a radical transformation. Within months, Emperor Franz Joseph ordered its demolition. In its place, he commissioned the construction of a Carmelite convent, a perpetual act of prayer and atonement for the souls of the deceased. The very ground where the tragedy occurred was consecrated, a silent attempt to erase the dark stain of the event, or perhaps to forever contain its unsettling energy. The convent's altar now stands exactly where Rudolf's bed once stood. Despite the imperial efforts to bury the truth, rumors and alternative theories proliferated. Was it a double suicide pact, a romanticized end to a forbidden love? Was Mary pregnant? Did Rudolf only kill Mary and then himself, or was he coerced? Some theories suggest political assassination, given Rudolf's liberal views and his flirtation with Hungarian separatists. Other whispers pointed to a family dispute, or even a struggle that went wrong. The lack of an immediate, thorough, and independent investigation, coupled with the swift disposal of evidence and bodies, only fueled these speculations. The psychological impact on the imperial family was immense. Empress Elisabeth never truly recovered from the loss of her only son, sinking into deeper melancholy and wearing black for the rest of her life. Emperor Franz Joseph, stoic and duty-bound, bore the weight of this private catastrophe with public composure. But the Meerling incident profoundly shaped his remaining years, hardening his resolve and contributing to the rigid conservatism. Today, the Meerling convent stands serene and solemn on the site of the former hunting lodge. The walls hold centuries of prayers, but also the echoes of that fateful night. A memorial stone marks the spot where Rudolf died. The dark secret of Meerling is not just the unanswered questions about how Rudolph and Mary died, but the profound human tragedy it represents. A desperate love, a family fractured, an empire shaken to its core, and a truth deliberately obscured. The convent, built upon the very ground of the tragedy, stands as a silent, eternal monument to a love and death that remain etched into the heart of Habsburg history, forever whispering its untold stories.